When Emily Carter and her younger brother Jacob walked into the harvest parade that Thanksgiving morning, they had no idea their lives and the lives of everyone in their quiet town were about to be shattered by one of the most meticulously planned attacks the world had ever seen. The town welcomed Thanksgiving with its usual warmth, unaware that this year's celebration would become a turning point in its history. In the days leading up to the holiday, families decorated their homes with colorful lights, wreaths, and handmade crafts. Children practiced for the school parade, while adults prepared dishes that had been passed down for generations. The air carried the scent of roasted spices, fresh pies, and burning firewood, creating the familiar comfort that people looked forward to every year. Nothing appeared out of place, and the town seemed to be living in its own peaceful bubble, untouched by the troubles of the outside world. As the morning sun rose on Thanksgiving Day, the streets slowly came to life. Cars lined driveways, and relatives from nearby cities arrived with gifts and excitement. Local shops opened early to serve customers who needed last-minute ingredients. Everywhere, people smiled, greeted neighbors, and exchanged cheerful wishes. There was a strong sense of unity that made the community feel like one big family. Even those who lived alone joined public gatherings so they wouldn't have to spend the holiday isolated. It was the kind of environment that felt safe, predictable, and welcoming. However, beneath the cheerful surface, small signs of unease lingered unnoticed. A few residents mentioned seeing unfamiliar footprints near the edge of the woods, but they assumed they belonged to hikers or wandering animals. Others heard distant noises late at night but dismissed them as fireworks or passing trucks. The community had never experienced serious crime, so their trust remained unshaken. No one imagined that these harmless observations were early warnings of a much darker presence moving silently through the town. Throughout the day, preparations continued at a steady pace. Volunteers gathered in the town hall to arrange tables for the evening feast, stacking chairs and setting out decorations. At the same time, families cooked special meals in their kitchens, filling their homes with laughter and tradition. Teenagers helped carry heavy pots while younger children ran in circles, impatient for the celebrations to begin. The rhythm of the day flowed naturally, following the same pattern it had followed for decades. Nothing indicated that danger was quietly making its way closer. As afternoon approached, small groups of people walked toward the main square, where the annual harvest parade would start. Local performers rehearsed their positions, and sound technicians tested speakers to ensure everything would run smoothly. The atmosphere was calm and filled with anticipation. Some families took photos near the giant turkey statue, while others enjoyed warm drinks from nearby stalls. Even the cold breeze felt refreshing rather than troubling. Yet somewhere far beyond the joyful gatherings, a figure watched from a hidden vantage point, studying the movements of the crowd. The stranger remained unnoticed by everyone, blending into shadows and avoiding main roads. Every detail was observed carefully: the timing of the parade, the flow of people, and the lack of security in certain areas. While the town celebrated, the unknown presence continued preparing for a moment that would forever shatter the peace the residents cherished so dearly. By the time evening lights flickered on, and families gathered for the feast, the stage was set without anyone realizing it. The town embraced the holiday with full hearts, completely unaware that the most devastating event in its history was only hours away. The stranger arrived quietly, almost like a shadow slipping into a place where they did not belong. No one noticed the figure as they entered the town, and their presence went completely unremarked. They carried nothing visible, blending into the ordinary scenery with ease. But every movement was deliberate. The stranger observed the town from a distance at first, watching families in their homes and people walking along the street. Every face, every routine, every habit was catalogued, stored in the mind like notes for a meticulous plan. There was something unnerving about the way the figure moved, calm yet purposeful, never drawing attention, yet fully aware of the eyes that might be upon them. Over the next several days, the stranger did not interact with anyone. They wandered through parks, stayed near the outskirts of the town, and studied patterns of traffic, security cameras, and even the way streetlights flickered at night. Local residents might have glimpsed a hooded figure passing quickly along alleyways or disappearing into wooded areas, but no one thought to question it. The stranger left no footprints, no trace of communication, no hint of intention, yet the focus was precise, almost obsessive, as if each observation were a piece of a larger puzzle that only the figure understood. The stranger's presence seemed to cast an invisible tension over the town. Even though the residents were unaware of it, there was a subtle disturbance in the air. Some dogs barked at nothing in particular, and a few neighbors reported strange rustling noises near their backyards during the late hours. These incidents were quickly dismissed as ordinary wildlife or the wind, yet they were all signs of someone watching, planning, and moving with silent precision. Each day the stranger tested boundaries, mapping escape routes and potential obstacles, ensuring that nothing could interfere with what was to come. At night, the figure slipped into the darkness like a phantom. Streetlights cast long shadows, but none fell on the stranger. They seemed almost part of the night itself, merging with the unseen corners of the town. Occasionally, the stranger paused to examine notes or sketches carefully hidden inside a worn backpack. These documents contained diagrams of streets, houses, and public areas, along with details about individuals who might be of importance. It was clear that this was not random wandering. Every step had intent, every glance was calculated. By the time Thanksgiving approached, the stranger had become intimately familiar with the town's layout and its people's habits. They had memorized every shortcut, every back door, and every path through the surrounding woods. Observing from the shadows, the figure noted the movement of vehicles, the locations of emergency services, and the timing of the parade preparations. Nothing seemed to escape notice. Even the most insignificant details, the placement of a garbage bin, or the presence of a street performer, were recorded mentally, because the stranger knew that small details could later become crucial. No one in town suspected that an unseen presence had already infiltrated their lives. While the residents went about their routines, preparing for the holiday and interacting with family and neighbors, the stranger's careful planning continued, hidden from view. The meticulous observations, the patient waiting, and the relentless attention to detail set the stage for a tragedy that no one could have anticipated. What appeared to be an ordinary, peaceful town was already under the gaze of a mind that intended to disrupt everything, leaving fear and chaos in its wake. The day of the harvest parade began with a sense of excitement that filled every corner of the town. Streets were lined with families eager to watch the floats, children waving small flags, and local musicians preparing their instruments. The air was alive with anticipation, laughter, and the scent of fresh-baked goods. For most residents, it was a day to enjoy tradition and community, a day to forget worries and immerse themselves in celebration. But beneath the cheerful atmosphere, an invisible threat moved closer, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the parade started, colorful floats rolled down the main street, adorned with autumn leaves, giant pumpkins, and smiling figures representing local schools and organizations. Children ran alongside, laughing and shouting, while parents snapped photos to capture the festive spirit. Performers waved and twirled, unaware of the danger lingering in the background. The crowd moved as one, forming a sea of celebration, trust, and ordinary human connection. Nothing seemed out of place, and the joy of the parade was contagious. Suddenly, in the center of the route, a faint haze began to appear. At first, it was almost imperceptible, drifting slowly along the pavement. Some onlookers thought it was smoke from a food stall or a small firework mishap. However, within minutes, the haze thickened, spreading unnaturally fast, and carrying a strange, chemical smell that caused discomfort and coughing. Confusion quickly replaced joy, as people began to notice that something was terribly wrong. Children clutched their parents, and strangers helped each other move away from the center. Panic began to ripple through the crowd, fueled by the unexplainable nature of the situation. In the midst of the chaos, people started collapsing one by one. At first it seemed random, but soon it became horrifyingly clear that the cause was not illness or accident. The toxic substance released into the air moved silently and efficiently, targeting the crowd in a way that was both precise and indiscriminate. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but their arrival only added to the confusion. Streets were clogged with fleeing citizens, and first responders struggled to reach those most in need. The entire parade route became a scene of terror, the bright decorations and cheerful floats now juxtaposed with screams, confusion, and despair. Witnesses later described the attack as sudden and meticulously timed. The stranger, hidden among the shadows of the parade route, had chosen the moment with care, ensuring maximum impact. The planning that had gone unnoticed for weeks now revealed itself in the form of destruction and chaos. Every detail the attacker had observed, every pattern noted in advance, contributed to the effectiveness of the attack. Security measures, small though they were, had been anticipated and circumvented. Escape routes had been studied, and obstacles removed or avoided. As the smoke and panic enveloped the streets, the town's sense of safety shattered in an instant. Parents searched desperately for children, strangers tried to help one another, and sirens pierced the air as additional emergency personnel arrived. In the chaos, it became clear that this was no ordinary tragedy, no accident, but a carefully orchestrated attack designed to leave maximum devastation. The parade, meant to celebrate community and togetherness, had become the stage for horror, forever changing the way the town viewed its most cherished holiday. By the time authorities began to regain control of the area, the impact was undeniable. Lives were lost, injuries were severe, and the town itself seemed transformed by fear. The harvest parade, once a symbol of joy, had become the first chapter in a nightmare that no one could have predicted, and the presence of the mysterious stranger loomed as an invisible, terrifying force behind it all. After the chaos of the parade, the town was plunged into a tense, uneasy silence. Streets that had once been filled with laughter were now eerily empty, marked only by abandoned belongings, overturned chairs, and the faint scent of smoke lingering in the air. Emergency responders worked tirelessly, attending to the injured and accounting for the missing, but the scale of the disaster made the task overwhelming. Amid the confusion, law enforcement immediately recognized that this was no ordinary tragedy. The precision, timing, and method of the attack suggested a calculated plan, one that demanded a meticulous investigation to uncover the perpetrator. A massive search operation began almost immediately. Officers blocked off streets, checked buildings, and scoured public spaces for clues. Helicopters hovered above, scanning the town from the air, while K-9 units were deployed to trace scents and locate anyone who might still be in hiding. The first leads were scarce. The chemical used in the attack left no fingerprints and no obvious point of origin. Surveillance cameras captured fleeting images of a hooded figure moving along the parade route, but the footage was grainy and inconclusive. It was as if the attacker had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only chaos and unanswered questions. Investigators soon turned their attention to the outskirts of town and the surrounding wooded areas. Here, abandoned containers were discovered along narrow paths, partially hidden by foliage. Each container appeared to have been placed deliberately, containing fragments of evidence and remnants of the chemical, but there were also false trails, footprints that abruptly ended, tracks that led nowhere, and signs of deliberate misdirection. It became clear that the attacker had anticipated a pursuit, laying traps to confuse and delay law enforcement. Every step taken by the authorities was anticipated and countered, a chilling indication of the killer's careful planning. The townspeople, meanwhile, were left in a state of shock. Families huddled together at home, fearful leaving their houses even for basic necessities. Rumors spread quickly, fueled by fear and uncertainty, as residents speculated about the attacker's identity and motives. Some believed it was a lone figure, others feared a coordinated group was operating in the shadows. The uncertainty was almost as paralyzing as the attack itself, as the town realized that the perpetrator had studied them, understood their routines, and had chosen this day for maximum impact. As the search continued, Investigators discovered that the attacker had been careful to erase traces of personal identification. Clothing, tools, and materials were stripped of labels or markings. Even items left behind were arranged in ways that obscured intent, making it difficult to determine whether they were genuine evidence or deliberate distractions. The meticulousness of the preparation suggested a level of patience and intelligence that unsettled everyone involved in the investigation. Days passed, and the hunt extended further into the surrounding forest. Officers moved carefully, scanning for hidden cabins, concealed pathways, and any signs of habitation. Each clue found deepened the mystery rather than solving it, revealing a methodical mind that had been at work for weeks, if not months. It was evident that the killer knew every potential escape route, every weak point in the town's security, and had calculated every step of the attack with chilling precision. By the time the search had progressed several miles beyond the town, the authorities began to piece together the enormity of the plan. The attack had been deliberate, the routes carefully mapped, and the methods calculated to create maximum fear and confusion. The stranger was no longer just a shadow among the trees. They were a calculated predator, familiar with the town, prepared for every contingency, and still somewhere out there watching, waiting, and beyond reach. The hunt for the killer had become a tense, exhausting race against an unseen enemy, and the town held its collective breath, knowing that the nightmare was far from over. Deep in the forest on the outskirts of town, officers finally stumbled upon a hidden cabin that seemed to have been overlooked by anyone who had passed through the area before. The structure was small and unassuming from the outside, camouflaged by thick undergrowth and shadows from towering trees. From a distance, it appeared abandoned, but the closer investigators got, the more signs they found of recent activity. Footprints in the soft soil led toward the cabin, some partially erased, others carefully redirected to confuse anyone following. The discovery sent a chill through the search team, who realized that they had come across a central point in the attacker's carefully orchestrated plan. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was immediately unsettling. The walls were covered in crude sketches of the town, its streets, and the locations of key buildings, including the parade route and local residences. The sketches were marked with notes, symbols, and coded instructions that at first seemed indecipherable. On tables and shelves lay containers of chemicals, equipment for mixing substances, and notebooks filled with meticulous observations. Every detail suggested that the cabin had been used as both a planning center and a base of operations. It became clear that the massacre had not been a random act of violence. It had been planned with frightening precision, designed to maximize fear and devastation. Among the evidence were lists of people, with names crossed out and others highlighted. Investigators realized that these were not ordinary targets. Each individual had been selected for a reason, though the connection was not immediately clear. Some names belonged to residents involved in the parade, while others were local officials, business owners, or community figures. There was no obvious pattern linking all the names, and yet the attacker had chosen them deliberately. The precision and foresight suggested a mind consumed by an obsession with revenge or punishment, targeting people who were symbolic or connected in some meaningful way. Further exploration revealed additional, more disturbing items. Hidden compartments contained photographs, maps with detailed escape routes, and timelines of when people would be in certain places during the parade. There were personal notes about the residents, observations on their routines, habits, and vulnerabilities. It became evident that the attacker had spent weeks, possibly months, gathering intelligence, studying the town and its people with unwavering attention to detail. Every step of the massacre had been pre-planned, every contingency accounted for, and every potential witness considered in advance. Despite the overwhelming amount of information, one crucial question remained unanswered. Why these particular people? The investigators could not yet determine the motive, though it became increasingly clear that it was personal. The meticulous care taken to avoid leaving fingerprints or DNA evidence further confirmed that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but the work of someone highly intelligent and deliberate. The cabin, once hidden among the trees, had been the nerve center of a chilling plan, a place where strategy and obsession had merged into something deadly. As evidence was catalogued and transported for analysis, the sense of dread among the officers was palpable. They realized that the massacre had been carefully orchestrated, and the attacker was likely still out there, observing the town from a hidden vantage point, waiting for the chaos to settle before taking further action. The discovery of the cabin transformed the investigation, revealing that the tragedy was only part of a larger, terrifying strategy. It became clear that the town had narrowly avoided an even greater disaster, and that the mind behind the massacre was far from ordinary. The hidden cabin stood as a silent testament to the planning, patience, and obsession that had turned a day of celebration into a nightmare no one would ever forget. The breakthrough came slowly, almost imperceptibly. Analysts working through the evidence discovered encrypted files hidden on a small, unremarkable flash drive among the materials in the cabin. At first, the files seemed indecipherable, protected by layers of complex coding. Days of careful work were required to unravel the layers, each sequence of numbers, symbols, and letters revealing another fragment of the attacker's mind. When the encryption was finally broken, the contents painted a disturbing picture of a motive that was deeply personal, calculated, and filled with a chilling sense of purpose. The files revealed that the attacker had suffered a profound loss years earlier, losing family members in circumstances that were neither accidental nor natural. The tragedy had been compounded by the involvement, or negligence, of several influential community members. These were individuals whose decisions, actions or inactions had caused irreversible harm. Over time, the attacker's grief had transformed into obsession, a desire for revenge so intense that it shaped every decision and action in the months leading up to the parade. What had seemed like a random act of violence was now clearly a meticulously plotted retaliation designed to punish those deemed responsible and, disturbingly, to create fear among anyone associated with them. Further examination of the files revealed detailed notes about each victim, outlining connections, perceived sins, and instances of neglect or wrongdoing. The parade had been chosen not by chance but for its symbolic value. It was an event where many of the targeted individuals would be together, exposed and vulnerable. The files included precise timing, escape routes, and contingency plans, showing an understanding of human behavior and crowd movement that bordered on obsessive. The attacker had anticipated responses from law enforcement, medical personnel, and the general public, demonstrating an unnerving level of foresight. Even more disturbing was the level of emotional intensity evident in the files. The attacker did not view the planned massacre as mere revenge. It was portrayed as a moral act, a correction of perceived injustice. Personal journals found alongside the files revealed recurring thoughts of fairness, punishment, and retribution, intertwined with memories of the original loss. The violence was rationalized in the attacker's mind as necessary, almost inevitable, a way to restore balance according to their own strict moral code. Each step of the plan, from chemical release to escape, was recorded with careful notes that indicated both precision and personal satisfaction in the thought of executing it successfully. Investigators began to piece together the timeline of preparation. Weeks of surveillance, observation, and logistical planning had been dedicated to understanding not only the town's physical layout, but also the social structure, identifying moments of vulnerability and opportunity. The files suggested that the attacker had considered numerous alternative dates and methods, but chose the parade specifically because of the number of targets, the public nature of the event, and the symbolic resonance of Thanksgiving, holiday associated with family, gratitude, and unity. The deliberate irony of the choice was unmistakable, a cruel inversion of the day's meaning. As the truth of the motive became clear, it sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The massacre was no longer just a horrifying act of violence. It was a carefully orchestrated act of vengeance, driven by unresolved grief and a desire for control. The attacker's meticulous preparation, personal vendetta, and the symbolic selection of the parade revealed a mind both brilliant and dangerously unhinged. Every element of the massacre was purposeful, leaving investigators grappling with the realization that the horror they had witnessed was only the surface manifestation of a deeply rooted and carefully nurtured obsession. After days of searching through forests, abandoned buildings, and hidden pathways, a breakthrough finally came. Drones equipped with thermal cameras detected unusual heat signatures beneath an old, dilapidated barn several miles from the town. The readings were faint but distinct, suggesting the presence of someone or something hidden underground. Officers quickly surrounded the structure, blocking all potential escape routes. Every approach was calculated. The barn could conceal traps or additional hazards, and the team proceeded with extreme caution, knowing that any misstep could cost lives. The tension was palpable, a quiet fear settling over the operation as officers moved closer to uncover the figure who had terrorized the town. Inside the barn, shadows stretched across broken beams and rotting wood, giving the appearance of a normal, abandoned structure. Yet the heat signatures indicated a hidden compartment or tunnel, and careful inspection revealed a narrow trapdoor in the floor. Beneath it lay a man-made tunnel, dug with deliberate care and likely used as an escape route or hiding place. Investigators realized that this tunnel was part of the attackers' meticulous planning, offering a hidden passage to evade pursuit or surveillance. Every step taken to conceal it reflected the same patience and precision seen in the massacre itself. As officers descended into the tunnel, the air grew colder and tighter. The passage twisted and narrowed, forcing careful navigation. At one point, a partial collapse occurred, sending debris tumbling and blocking a section of the tunnel. The attacker, however, had no choice but to continue moving forward and was eventually caught near the far end. The sudden confrontation was quick and silent. The element of surprise was on the side of law enforcement. The masked figure had no opportunity to resist meaningfully, and in minutes, the person responsible for the massacre was in custody. Back at the surface, forensic experts began analyzing the barn and the tunnel, discovering more evidence of meticulous preparation. Hidden compartments contained maps, additional chemical containers, and coded messages. Officers noted the precision in the construction of the tunnel, the careful concealment of its entrance, and the thoroughness with which the attacker had erased personal traces. Even the location of the barn, miles from the town yet strategically chosen, demonstrated a clear understanding of escape tactics and the layout of the surrounding terrain. Every piece of evidence confirmed that the massacre had been planned with chilling intelligence. The captured attacker was taken into custody under heavy security. While details of identity were withheld for safety reasons, initial profiles indicated a person of high intelligence, obsessive tendencies, and an extreme focus on revenge. Investigators began piecing together connections between the individual and the tragic events in the town, analyzing motivations, behavioral patterns, and the psychological state that could drive such a precise and merciless act of violence. The interrogation and analysis would take weeks, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. Even after the arrest, the town remained in a state of heightened anxiety. Families struggled to reconcile the relief of the capture with the trauma of what had occurred. Authorities discovered additional plans that had been abandoned or delayed, indicating that the attacker had contemplated even larger-scale devastation. The meticulousness of the planning left a lingering unease. The captured figure had been competent, calculating, and capable of inflicting much more if circumstances had allowed. The arrest marked the beginning of the recovery process for the town, but also the start of a lengthy investigation. The tunnel, the barn, and the remaining materials offered insight into the mind behind the massacre, revealing both the brilliance and the danger inherent in the individual's obsession. While the immediate danger had ended, the implications of the attacker's planning and motives continued to reverberate, ensuring that the shadow of the tragedy would remain over the town for years to come. The aftermath of the massacre left the town in a state of collective shock. Streets that had once been bustling with holiday cheer were now quiet, littered with debris, abandoned belongings, and the lingering echoes of chaos. Families who had once gathered in celebration now sat in silence, struggling to process the loss of loved ones and the horror they had witnessed. Homes felt smaller, less safe, as if the violence had seeped into every corner of the community. The town's sense of security, once taken for granted, had been shattered in an instant, leaving an invisible scar that would remain for years. Local authorities worked tirelessly to help the town recover, offering support, counseling and guidance to those affected. Emergency shelters were established, and volunteers assisted with basic needs, food and comfort. Yet no amount of aid could fully restore what had been lost. Children who had seen the attack struggled with nightmares, adults grappled with guilt and fear, and even the strongest residents found themselves haunted by the memory of that day. The holiday that had symbolized gratitude and togetherness had been replaced by grief, suspicion, and an unsettling sense of vulnerability. The investigation continued long after the streets had been cleared. Evidence collected from the hidden cabin, the barn and the surrounding areas revealed the meticulous planning behind the massacre, confirming that the event had been an act of revenge rather than random violence. Authorities worked to understand the full scope of the attackers' motives, piecing together connections between victims and the twisted logic that had guided the killer's actions. Analysts discovered that the individual had intended to inflict maximum fear and chaos, studying the town and its residents with obsessive precision. The depth of premeditation left the public stunned and horrified, forcing many to confront the reality that such calculated evil could exist in their own community. The town itself faced a long road to recovery. Public gatherings were limited, and the annual Thanksgiving parade, the symbol of community and joy, was canceled indefinitely. Businesses struggled to reopen, schools adjusted to trauma-informed learning, and social events became cautious affairs. The once vibrant streets that had echoed with laughter now carried a quiet vigilance. Even ordinary routines, like walking through the park or attending a school event, were tinged with fear. Residents became more cautious, more watchful, and more aware of the fragility of their safety. Media attention turned the town into a global focal point. Headlines described the massacre in graphic detail, broadcasting images of the chaos and loss worldwide. While some coverage was sympathetic, much of it sensationalized the tragedy, creating a mixture of fear and fascination. The identity of the attacker was largely withheld, adding a layer of mystery that fueled speculation, conspiracy theories, and endless debate. For many, the town became a symbol of vulnerability, a reminder that even seemingly peaceful communities could harbor darkness. Even with the attacker in custody, uncertainty lingered. Investigators discovered evidence suggesting the possibility of accomplices or a network of influence, raising fears that others might attempt similar acts. The psychological impact of the massacre weighed heavily on the residents, who struggled to reconcile relief with ongoing anxiety. Therapy programs, community meetings, and support groups were established, but the emotional and social recovery would take years, if not decades. Ultimately, the tragedy reshaped the town forever. The massacre became a permanent chapter in local history, a day remembered not for celebration, but for loss, fear, and resilience. Families mourned, the community rebuilt cautiously, and the shadow of the attacker's planning remained a haunting reminder of how deeply one person's obsession could devastate an entire town. The events of that Thanksgiving would echo in memory, media, and local lore, leaving a scar that even time could not fully heal.